it's sort of irrelevant that it's sound, to be honest. And then I also think a great one is we can't unlock this value using something else. Hello. Hi, George. How are you?
Bloomin' brilliant. Thank you very much. How are you?
Wonderful. I'm wonderful. Thanks. And welcome, George. Welcome to the Hear Me Out podcast, George.
Luke, stop.
Good day to you.
We never talk this way. Normally it's abuse or it's something that
shut your mouth, you dirty little tramp. How's that?
There we go.
So
I feel normal again now.
There you go. Welcome to the Hear Me Out podcast for everyone that's listening. And we're a creative music agency helping brand use sound strategically. We've helped brands with a combined revenue in the billions to use sound to unlock value only sound can.
In this episode 9, Luke. Episode 9.
Almost there. We're almost there.
We are in this series asking each other if commonly held beliefs about sonic branding are true or whether they are misconceptions. And we've basically proven that most things that are talked about sound are misconceptions. And in this episode today, episode 9, I just cannot believe we've got 2 more left of this series, and then you won't have us on your airwaves for a little bit. Sorry to break it to you. In this episode, we are exploring the very common conversation of we don't have any budget for it yet. And I'm not quite sure how it's a misconception, but we were really struggling with the title on this one. But we have this conversation so many times.
This one in here.
so I wanted to frame this as how can we help people that understand, you're at episode 9, or this is the first time listening to this podcast, in which case, let me frame sonic branding for you and the use of sound. Anytime a brand is using sound in marketing, in product sounds, in apps, at events, in store, on hold music, stop me now, Luke. Stop me now. There's so many use cases.
Why would I stop you? I want to hear more.
So many use cases. Brands don't know how they sound, but every brand has a sound. Every marketing campaign has a sound, but has the sound been considered? We're finding that most people haven't had the chance to consider it or put a strategy into place, which is why we created Hear Me Out in the first place. So that is the crux of the series and what we're trying to do with this. And I think what we want to do is frame the conversation in today's episode about what could you go back and say to your team to reframe how they think about budget in regards to sound. A lot of people say we don't have sound for the budget. Oh, that sounds like a great idea, but we don't have the budgets at the moment for it. Now, you only don't have a budget for something if the value of doing it hasn't been portrayed as crucial or valuable.
Well, if you're not aware of the value, essentially, that's the thing, isn't it? If you're
exactly,
if you have listened to all previous 8 episodes of this, then you are. We are assuming that you see the value in sound, in which case you are potentially wanting to go to your wider team, bosses, colleagues, etc., and try and use sound. And so one of the conversations or one of the pushbacks you might have is we don't have budget for that.
Yeah,
and then
which we hear a lot, and also people what's the right word? More times than not, people will come back and say, sound is a really good idea. We really love it. I personally love sound, but it just feels a bit of a nice to have at the moment. And, that's nothing new to this conversation on this podcast. But really, what it made us realize in the early days of Hear Me Out is we're not framing this right. We keep coming at it as like sound will do this and music will do this for you. Whereas actually, we all know the power of your fonts and your colors and your logos and using those consistently builds good brand, right? So sound is the same thing, but we don't think about it in the same way. It's another one of those tools that you could line up into your suite of branding materials.
That I think is an interesting thing just to reiterate in terms of the way that people we've spoken to have had the most success with unlocking budget within the wider scope of their brand is when they can go to somebody in control of the budget and say, we are using sound as a tool to unlock value that only sound can. Just as fonts, colors, logos, all tools. The copy and the words that you use, all just a tool to unlock value to get more out of the connection with your customers.
I'd almost be tempted to encourage people to be more elusive than that as well and remove sound. because we kind of remove sound generally from the front end of, like, when we really start talking about like putting a pitch together or a strategy together. Really, we nestle deeply into like branding and marketing and I guess ROI without using those kind of terms. We're really talking about the fact. If I said to you, right, by buying loads of flowers and putting them into your offices, I can prove that if you spend £100,000 on flowers in the offices, it will improve the mood of your team and your company will make £1 million more a year. If I could prove that and the concept actually worked and I could back it up with case studies or whatever, as a business owner, you'd be like, it's a no-brainer. Of course, I'm going to start spending £100,000 a year on flowers to make an extra £1 million. And that's what every other tool...
Yeah, exactly. But I think an interesting thing to do as a slight pivot on that would be if you went to your boss and said, I can make us for £100,000, I can make us £1 million. Do you trust me with what I'm going to do? And if they said, if you get that kind of return, here's £100,000 for sure. And you went, great. Tomorrow you'll see what it is. And then they turned up and there was £100,000 worth of flowers in the office. And you said, don't worry. They'd be like, what the fuck have you done?
Yeah.
Whereas that's sort of the thing with sound, isn't it? Is that people can think of it as such a flowery,
and it's intentionally an extreme
abstract
example.
But that will work. If you're thinking about this, you should all spend £100,000 on flowers and put them in your office.
Yeah, and we do have a great lawyer that will get us out of the
oh,
case
I thought you were going to say, because Nikki came in with flowers earlier, I thought you were going to say we have a great florist.
No.
We could get a cut from Pete as well. You'd probably get $10,000 off of that.
Nikki is Luke's partner, by the way, for anyone listening, and you haven't met Nikki. She's a wonderful human being. But just context there. But just before we started recording, she walked in with a fresh set of flowers, and that's probably why it's on my mind. And I'm looking at a blossom tree as we record this. Yes. But what the picture I'm trying to paint is, that traditionally, that putting some video content out there will create awareness about a certain product, and that will turn it into some kind of ROI, and that's how you can justify it. And I think there's certain tools that have gone down a path far enough and long enough that we just kind of intrinsically trust it. We know that social media is going to bring some kind of return, so you don't get any pushback on social media being part of the strategy for the year.
Having some of the budget.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why sound falls into this trap of like, it's not just it's not like social media where it's kind of like, you don't need to prove it to me. I know it works. I know social media is good if we get it right. Whereas sound, I think for many people is, a lot of people don't know the stats behind it. They don't know the returns that they might get. They don't know that sonic branding will have X amount of impact on a brand. I was trying to figure out the value that Intel has created off the back of their on LinkedIn. And it's something like, in the amount I don't know how much they turn over in a year. It's insane amounts of money. But essentially, I came to a number using statistics on like having a Sonic logo, what that does for the consumer, et cetera, and got to a point of, it was like $6.9 billion is what the recognition of the brand, which sound has played a big part of, has generated for the brand.
That's crazy.
Using statistics, that's not like a number I'm just thinking like, I think it's about 6.9 billion. Like, you could do the same thing with like how much of their marketing spend has turned into how much income. That's the kind of process I did. And we know it, but a lot of people aren't able to then go back and say, actually, no, it's not a nice to have. It's not actually we should be considering this as part of the marketing budget. Don't think about it as sound. Just think of it as like, by us considering sound, we're going to increase by X amount, so we should include it in that part of the budget.
And then it comes down to, because I obviously agree with you completely, but I think then it comes down to who's in on the conversations and how much expertise they have in sound, because you can't be expecting people to prioritize sound in their list of budget allocations if they, one, don't know the power that it has and the ability to prove that ROI. And secondly, if they don't really know enough about sound to even understand how their choices impact the impression and the reputation of the brand. So that's where I think people, it's very easy, or it's much easier, sorry, not very easy. It's much easier for people when you see something, if you like it or not. That's kind of just what it is. You're like, I know what that is. I know what I like. I know what I don't like. There you go. This is making me feel a certain way. Whereas the sound, if you don't have the vocabulary, you can't hear something and be like, oh, I don't like the electronic drums and that really weird, fuzzy treatment they've got on the vocals. That's a bit abrasive to me. I'd pull that out. You're just like, ugh, no, I don't want that. So it's being able to articulate your ideas to even be able to bring it into the conversation. And again, that's what we're always trying to get in from the beginning, so that then people can see that, so that then when it comes to deciding budgets, what is that, the stat, like only 4% of a budget is spent on sound in general when it comes to campaigns. 4%. Like if you have, that's crazy. $100,000 if you spend it on an ad, you're only spending $4,000. Whereas when you think about the impact that music has on something, it's way more than 4%.
Way more.
It's 40% probably.
Exactly. And we would love to see it sway to 40%, because then I think that would show and indicate that,
'cause we like money.
It will show and indicate the value that people see in it again. And I think it's really interesting when you say about articulating it, because I do think that is part of it's not a problem, but part of the process, I guess, as to why people don't necessarily. Yeah, it's a challenge that people. Yeah. I don't think it's even that people just get nervous about it. I honestly think it's just an educational thing. Definitely. And we did a brand questionnaire with a new brand that we're working with last week, and one of the people on the call kept saying, "Oh, I'm not really good at like sound terms," and we had to say back, like that is, if anything, a good thing, because most of your audience are also not going to know musical terms. So really, what we'd love to hear is you express, how do you feel? And I really felt that about this certain song, or like, I really didn't like that, and I don't know why. And sometimes that's just enough. But what the music is clearly having is an impact on you. Yeah. And that's ultimately all we're trying to understand, and it's our job to translate, all the demographic and the brand goals and values, etc., into sound. That's our job. But really, your job as a marketer or a brander is just to be aware enough about sound to call in the right team, in the same way that marketing and branding teams call in experts in social media marketing, right? It's because they don't have the expertise to make the social media, so they pull in a team to do it. But nobody goes, we should do that with sound as well.
And I think an interesting point to sort of expand on that a little bit is, if you're listening to this and you think, I'd love some sonic branding, I'd love to have some of this in our brand, you also have the opportunity here to be taking an activation or a campaign that has more budget intrinsically and has more access to it as the catalyst for the creation of a piece of audio you could use in a wider scope. So you could be thinking, okay, great, let's get a track made for this campaign that we're doing. And then potentially from this track, we could start to pull out a sonic logo, or we could start to use some of these assets for other elements of our content that we're doing. So instead of going to your CMO and saying, hey, I want to do the sonic branding project, because sonic branding can be such a daunting term when you equate it, or when you parallel it with the typical rebranding or branding of a company, which is, 2-year long process, laborious, a lot of key decision makers need to be looped in, etc., as opposed to, we're doing this campaign, we're going to spend some money, why don't we spend some money on this? And also, effectively, you're getting a 2-for-1 there to some degree. You're saying, let's have great sound for this campaign that we can then rework or manipulate to flex to different situations as well. So it's like, oh, great. Well, we've just done both of those things in one swoop.
Yeah. You just got me thinking about like a real entry-level version of what you just said as well. And I think you made a good point of like, well, you said about going back to the CMO, going back to the team, and then trying to like, get some budget to make a bespoke track or something. I was actually wondering if you could take the decision, if you've got 10 grand to spend on creating a piece of content, what else are you spending that 10 grand on that you maybe don't need to spend any money on, that you've prioritized or somebody else has prioritized? But you're like, why are we spending 2 grand on costumes? Surely between us, we can figure out the costumes. And then we've got 2 grand to put towards music. If you've been given 10 grand for the project, maybe you can just rejig the budget you've already got and the priorities, and not be thinking, we've already spent 10 grand, so we don't have any money now for like bespoke music. Sorry, maybe next time.
Or combining
Yeah, or combining,
multiple activations or projects that you're doing. So you could take 3-4 for music from the first, but know that you're going to then be using it on the second one as well. So then, and maybe say costumes, you're doing a similar thing. So you're crossing over and you're picking from two pots there. But then you have that asset for future ones where you're then not having to find as much for just a simple
and I think it's
extension.
that reframing that I find really interesting, because if somebody came to us and was like, I'm really keen on this. I had a call this morning and the guy was like, I really see and have always felt how important sound is. And we're pitching to a major brand, and they came back and said, we love the idea, we just don't have budget for it right now. And it was specifically sound related, but it was part of a big campaign. So the campaign will still go ahead, but they're just going to cut out the sound bit of it. I would have loved to have been in that call and been like, so what else could we maybe consider cutting, or consider, posing the question to you of like, do you need to spend 20 grand on this bit if I can prove to you that the sound will have a bigger impact on the campaign that you're trying, the goal that you're trying to get out of the campaign? Basically, we're just never there in the conversations. And I don't think, even let's put us aside, if you get a sound team involved in any of your conversations, they will probably have a solution. I'd like to think we're really like forward thinking in the way that our solutions are, but just on a very, very basic level, whoever you have previously worked with on sound, ask them, how could I potentially rejig this conversation so that I can get you some budget? Can you help me? I think that'd be an interesting outcome.
Yeah, 100%. No, I think it's a great idea, and you don't know unless you ask. Maybe at the end, in some circumstances, you won't, but also maybe at the end you will. And again, there's a room to be had for, like, if somebody's saying, look, we need $3,000, but you're saying we don't have that, then you could be like, all right, let's do 1.5 now, and then let's use it for the next campaign, and I can find 1.5 then as well. There's a lot of interesting maneuvers that you can do so that you get it created, get the benefit of it with the recall and awareness, etc., and it being strategically positioned, and just spread that. So there's so many opportunities, but it's just
especially
people not asking and speaking.
Yeah, especially when you're working with someone that sees themselves as a sound partner, right? Like if you spoke to a social media agency and you kind of were like, we don't have the budget for the full thing right now, but I love the full strategy that you've just given us. Is there some kind of way we can make it work if we like lock in 2 years? So we might not give it to you all now, but let's say like if we hit certain targets, then we can give it to you later, or even just remove the targets thing. Like, is there a way that we can just pay over a payment plan over the next year? And then, we can afford the full thing right now. I think we're used to those kind of conversations, and I think that should exist in the sound world as well.
Yeah.
So
100%.
I think it's really just about problem solving on how to get the money available in order to make it happen, rather than just letting somebody that doesn't necessarily know about sound just stick with something they're comfortable with. I think that's probably an interesting way to think about it, is because I think that's how most decisions are made. We know this works, so we'll stick with it. We won't take the risk on this new way of thinking.
Yeah, exactly. But it's so interesting, we're always really surprised because we're in it every day. As soon as you start to talk to people about the power of sound and the recall and making them aware of examples that they already experience, they're like, right. And then you can see it click in their eyes where they're like, I can't believe I haven't been thinking about it like that, because it's sort of a weird catch-22. It's so ingrained and so innate, its impact, that you then don't recognize it. It's like you don't know what you got till it's gone type situation almost. And
Sweet
that is
paradise.
also you don't know. And I guess a lot of people are experiencing that. Like, we're finding conversations where the content's getting muted, and it's like, oh, well, now this really doesn't work because we didn't really care about sound. We used this sound. Now this video has no sound, and now it really doesn't work. That's how important sound is. Great. Why didn't we think about it before?
Yeah, and you end up paying for it more at the end rather than up front, whether it's a law case to reference our licensing episode, or whether it's you just missed out. Because a lot of brands as well, I was just thinking, a lot of brands will spend money and budget on sound, but just for a one-off use case. So the amount of times we have a conversation where it's like, actually, have you considered that it might be saving you some money if we create some music that you can use for the next 2 years, rather than you licensing 10 songs over the next 2 years? Have you actually calculated whether or not that is cheaper?
Yeah,
or
exactly.
have you what was the chat last week? It was based around the amount of hours that the team currently spend searching for music.
Yeah.
And have you ever thought about 20 hours a week charged at let's just say £30 an hour for your employee? That's like a lot of money. £600 a week.
And they weren't even happy with the music.
And they
that
weren't
was the
even
other
happy
thing.
on the music.
It's not even like they spent that time and then they were like, "This is fucking perfect. This is incredible. I can't wait to use this." It was then just about doing the job.
Yeah.
But they already knew.
And important to say, 20 hours a week sounds excessive, and I'm not exaggerating those hours. If you've got 5 employees making video content every day or every other day, and they're spending on average like 4 hours a week, that's only an hour at a time. And you'll be surprised how long they are actually spending trying to find music.
It comes down to the ability to articulate and to be able to find the music as well. That's the thing, because it's like these people aren't experts, so how
they
are
could
they
spend
supposed
half
to?
a
So
day
it
trying
takes
to
time.
find this piece of music. So £600 a week times 4, to get to a monthly cost, that's £2,400 a month that you're spending on employees looking for music. So if we came to you and said, "Oh, well, we only charge you £1,000 to provide you with music," we've saved you £1,400, and your team are cracking on with other work that they say they don't have enough time for. It's just reframing the conversation.
Yeah, and exactly that, because to your point, it's literally like, even like, taking sound out of it. If you were framing it like, if I could take something that costs you £2,400 to do poorly every month and charge you £1,000 to do it very well every month, would that be interesting to you? Great, cool. Let's talk about how much you're spending on music. Because all of a sudden it's like this whole sound as a tool thing. It's irrelevant. Like we could be teaching them how to knit as a tool to increase their brand recall. And as long as it's giving you a ROI on it, then why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah. So I'm going to challenge you with this to wrap up the episode. And this is going to be fully ball in our own court here. I'm going to challenge you with, like, I'm a creative director and we've had a great call. I love sound. Well. Yeah. Love sound. I want to do something with you. I know I'm going to get some pushback. How would you frame pitching us, hear me out, to the boss that needs convincing that sound is worth spending money on?
I think one of the most well-received aspects of what I'm about, I think one of the best ways of positioning it, from my experience so far, is it's a piece of sound that is going to take away future decisions and make things much simpler and on brand and think strategically. So I think a big issue that a lot of brands have is deciding what music to use. And it's a whole thing, and loads of people get involved. It's not just searching; it's then people deciding on the searches that people have done. Yeah. So taking that out of a brand's taking it off of their to-do list, I think is something that people really connect with. I think as well, just the idea of thinking of sound strategically. I think that's also something that really resonates with CMOs, et cetera, because it is a strategic decision. And I think then framing it as just another tool, it's sort of irrelevant that it's sound, to be honest. And then I also think a great one is, we can't unlock this value using something else. Like if you gave me £100,000 to go away and redesign our logo, it still won't unlock the value that spending 20 grand on sound right now can. Yes, we can redesign our logo, and that will give us maybe a bigger ROI. It'll increase our bottom line, but it won't take over from what sound can do. Not even the attention. It's just a specific thing. What is a good analogy? I'm not very good with just thinking of analogies straight away, but which is going to not make this very good. So I was hoping you'd jump in, but I appreciate that.
That's silence. So I was like, well, what am I thinking? Listening to this.
Yeah. So
you've got it in you. I believe in you.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's like you can't make a plane fly faster by changing the color of the seats inside.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I like where this is
God,
going.
I was struggling there. As I was saying it, I was like, what the fuck are you going to say?
what can I do?
was going to say throwing it down. Yeah, exactly. But you can make it go faster by coating it with a product called A-glaze, which reduces the friction of the air on the outside. So that A-glaze is sound, and that color of your seats is your branding, your visual branding. Like you don't change you can't get one using the other.
I like it. Is that
A-glaze is a company A-glaze is a company that started off on planes that I then spent a summer in the south of France applying to mega yachts because it reduced friction. So they optimized their fuel. So they went to people, I imagine, and said, "Hey, this is real in the south of France and Antibes. I'll show you the port when we go there for Cannes Lion." And so I imagine their sell would have been, "Hey, how much do you spend on fuel in a year?" We spend 100,000 euros. Great. If you give me 10,000 euros, you'll spend 60,000 euros this year. Awesome. 30 grand.
Are they sponsoring the podcast today?
Hopefully. If they're still going,
If
I don't
they're
know.
not-
Dave, are you listening?
Beep the name out. I want you to beep the name out. I'm not giving any advertising away unless they're giving us 10 grand.
I'm not sure it's our target market if the mega yacht owners and captains, but
I think that was a good analogy, though. I'm proud of you for that one. That was
Thank you.
bloody
Really
good.
appreciate that.
Because when you started saying about planes, I was thinking, oh my God.
I'm going to try talking analogies more so I get better at it. Do you have those friends, though? Like that can just, I've got a guy that I know, and he just talks in analogies the whole fucking time. Oh, well, it's like when you're building a house, or like, it's like when you're making a wreath at Christmas time, and and you're like, what? They all make sense and they're all great, but I'm like, how does your brain work like this?
It is a good way to, and it's actually a really good way to wrap up this conversation, because the whole point of this conversation is based around not being able to translate back to the team what this is going to do, right? And so really, I employ anybody listening to this to like come up with an analogy, come up with something that's not sound related, that kind of wraps up the conversation that we would have, that then gets them on the phone with us, or on a call where we can just get some ideas out and then find because everyone reacts to things differently, right? Everyone has something. Planes might not have hit the spot for somebody listening to this podcast, but if I made another analogy about dogs or cats, they might have done. So, for the bit of advice I would give as well is even just start up on a real basic principle of figure out how much time you're spending on music.
Yeah.
Figure out what the cost actually is to the brand, to the company, to you and your department. If you say you don't have any money available, then where is money being wasted elsewhere that would be like, oh, now I've just freed up $2,000, right?
Yeah.
And start there. I think just do some real simple maths. Do some simple where are we right now? And obviously we can help with that conversation. But I think that's the right starting point to then be like, so now we do actually have a problem that we can solve. Because until you have a problem to solve, music aside, why would you bring any process into a brand or into a company? You only bring a process in if there's a problem, like you don't have enough sound, so we need some virtual assistants.
Yeah,
or we
don't
exactly know how to do social media, so you'll bring a social media company in. So almost create the problem that you need to solve that allows you to use sound better, because you already know the value of sound, which is why you're still listening to episode
You deserve
number 9.
You deserve it.
Oh, Luke, we've got one more episode after this. I'm getting emotional.
It's exciting. Are you?
You're just excited, so we don't have to talk on Zoom anymore.
I talk all the time, mate. Talk multiple times a day. I love it.
Right.
I don't know what my life would be like without you. Do you have anything to add, George?
Goodbye. I got to say it this time.
Goodbye, George. Thanks for listening.